In our campus communities, rape culture is heavily prevalent. The shared attitude creates a climate that normalizes sexual violence. It is perpetrated through objectification, victim blaming, slut shaming, the trivialization of rape, and the refusal to acknowledge the systemic damage caused by any form of sexual violence. This is how your chapter can end rape culture and advocate for survivors of sexual violence.
Hello, everyone. In this digital rhetoric project, I hope to address the many ways in which fraternity and sorority life can prevent sexual assault and support members affected by interpersonal violence. Through education, I also intend to establish the framework for individual chapters becoming catalysts of change in shifting a campus climate that promotes rape culture. As a sorority sister and survivor of sexual assault, I hope that everyone can learn from this accessible video and develop the skills necessary for preventing and responding to sexual violence. Sexual violence is a pervasive issue on college campuses across the nation. According to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, 11.2% of all college students experience sexual violence. Within the undergraduate student population, 23% of all female-identifying students and 5.4% of all male-identifying students experience rape or sexual assault during college. Not only are young adults ages 18 to 24 at an elevated risk of sexual violence, college students are often more susceptible than their non-student peers based on several environmental factors. Limited supervision, increased alcohol and recreational substance use, unfamiliar environments, and casual sexual encounters are all components that place college students at greater risk of sexual violence. In fact, male-identifying students are reported as 78% more susceptible to becoming a victim of sexual violence than non-student men of the same age demographic. If that isn't a jarring statistics, the Office of Violence Against Women and the Bureau of Justice Statistics found that 1 in 4 undergraduate women will experience sexual assault before they finish college. Considering the women in your chapter, the National Institute of Justice regards membership in a sorority as a factor associated with increased risk of sexual violence in college women. Additionally, transgender, genderqueer, non-binary, and non-conforming students are the most at-risk demographic, with 21% reporting having been sexually assaulted. In comparison, sexual violence is more prevalent on college campuses than other crimes, including robbery. College women are twice as likely to be sexually assaulted than they are to be robbed on campus. Yet most colleges and universities encourage incoming students to bring a small safe or lockbox with them to secure personal items in the residence halls. Known as the red zone, more than 50% of college sexual assaults occur within the first few months of the fall semester, with first-year students at an increased risk during the start of their first and second semesters in college. Avoiding higher education is not a realistic response. Instead, more must be done on campuses to educate and prevent sexual violence. For constructive change to be effective, a cultural shift in attitude is required. In order to make campuses safer for students, students have to feel safe and supported. Universities would be grossly negligent to presume that their campus community is not affected by sexual violence. Understanding the scope of the problem and addressing it are the first steps in alleviating it. These statistics are not designed to generate fear, but to acknowledge the pervasive issue at hand in order to work towards resolving it. Would it be a fair assumption that your tour guide, orientation leader, or admissions counselor didn't directly disclose to you just how prevalent sexual violence is on campus? While institutions of higher learning are required by the U.S. Department of Education and the Jean Cleary Disclosure of Campus Security Policy and Campus Crime Statistics Act to release annual crime records, universities can't communicate what hasn't been reported. Unfortunately, instances of sexual violence are often underreported, and the statistics are misrepresentative of the severity of the problem. College-age victims are often less likely to report to law enforcement, with only 20% of female-identifying students choosing to report, whereas 32% of non-student women of the same age demographic opt to file reports. The American Civil Liberties Union estimates that at least 95% of campus rapes go unreported. The decision to report, in whatever capacity, is an incredibly personal choice that is often influenced by both internal and external factors, including considering the incident a personal matter, fear of retribution or retaliation, not wanting the perpetrator to receive punishment, preconceived apprehensions that the police will not or cannot do anything to help, and opting to report but not through conventional law enforcement. Many universities offer students the option to disclose with the Office of Community Standards for sanctions through the Board of Conduct rather than the criminal justice system. This would serve to have a rapist barred from campus instead of prosecuted, and is often a less time-consuming and re-traumatizing process. Stigma associated with sexual violence may also create barriers to reporting. Survivors may fear not being believed, not being supported, and also being made to feel invalidated in their experiences. In no way does not reporting equate the experience not happening. Reporting is not validity. Some survivors choose to not report immediately, and some choose to not report at all. Those who wait are often still coming to terms with their experiences. Coming forward with allegations forces survivors to be vulnerable, and dredging up memories can be re-traumatizing. The National Women's Study projects 1 in every 3 rape victims will develop post-traumatic stress disorder in their lifetimes. Knowing that sexual violence happens, but that instances go underreported, it is important to create an environment that fosters support for those affected by interpersonal violence. Reducing stigma, withholding judgment, and normalizing the experience of disclosing are all contributing factors to ending rape culture and making campuses safer for students. While campuses do their own training, mostly to first-year students, about interpersonal violence, it is vital to reinforce this information within each individual chapter. From its core values and purpose, fraternity and sorority life should be a support system to all members. The bonds of a brotherhood or sisterhood foster environments where members are more likely to confide in one another and disclose personal information. Even if sexual assault does not happen at chapter events or socials, members may come forward sharing their experiences. For some, that may happen within a Big Little pairing. Big Little may be the first college friendship that a first-year student in fraternity and sorority life experiences. The organization provides them with a role model that they can trust and rely on. Not only should chapters be putting forth every effort to prevent interpersonal violence, they should be supporting their members affected by it. Older students should be demonstrating behaviors that foster advocacy and condemn attitudes that perpetuate rape culture. Individual chapters can protect and support their members through education, prevention, response, and advocacy. In terms of education, there are 5 steps to effectively informing a chapter about sexual violence. The first would be understanding the prevalence of the issue at hand. Chapters can do this by communicating their university's Clery Report data to members and encouraging campus safety. Chapters should also always acknowledge and reprimand the mindsets that incite sexual violence. If someone is acting out of line or furthering a narrative that stigmatizes survivors of sexual violence, it is important to appropriately intervene. Second, it is important to learn how to spot the signs of predatory behaviors. If your fraternity brother or sorority sister is an aggressor, you have a responsibility to interfere. While many sexual violence prevention programs teach methods for intervention, it is important to know what to look for first. There is no cookie-cutter rapist. There are behavioral patterns associated with perpetrators of sexual violence, but overall, there is no definitive model of what to expect. Knowing that, it is important to be vigilant of several red flags, including sexual entitlement, unwanted touching, persistence, and isolation. If you know someone who feels like they are consistently entitled to sex, appropriately touches people without their consent, is aggressively insistent on getting their way, never taking no for an answer, and removes people from public settings to get them alone, chances are you know a perpetrator of sexual violence. Be a good brother or sister. Address these behaviors before they lead to violent situations. The third component aligns with recognizing behaviors and intervening before a situation becomes dangerous. Each chapter should be trained in bystander intervention, Consider socials like you're walking through the airport, and if you see something, say something. There are 3 outlined approaches to bystander intervention: direct, distract, and delegate. A direct approach would be addressing the potential assailant. While I would love to believe in a naive world where someone may not recognize their behaviors as inappropriate or violent, and that informing them will prevent their actions and future potential assaults, it is more likely that addressing perpetrators directly will cause them to realize they are being watched and will force them to stop. The distract method would require causing a scene that subtly removes the potential victim from the environment. This approach is incredibly easy, even for confrontation avoidant personalities. Say something simple like, "Hey girl, come to the bathroom with me." It's super effective, super discreet, and super safe. Delegating would be if you are uncomfortable being involved or the situation is potentially triggering or dangerous to you. Instead, ask someone else to intervene. Tell the risk manager or sober in charge if your organization utilizes those systems, or find someone else that can help to alleviate the situation. And if you're ever out and someone comes to you saying, "I think so-and-so is in danger," don't be dismissive, just help to diffuse the situation. If they were in danger, congrats, you helped someone. And if they weren't in danger, they'll go back to whatever it was they were doing and it will be no big deal. It's better to offer assistance than to ignore a potentially dangerous situation. 4th is employing advocacy training. This includes learning the signs of trauma associated with sexual assault, understanding how to effectively help victims, and being informed on campus and organizational resources. If you truly care for someone, it is better to ask and to be wrong than to let someone struggle with the effects of sexual assault alone. While the warning signs may be different, some of the more common include depression, lack of energy or motivation, withdrawing from normal activities, changes in sleep or appetite, self-harm, suicidal ideation, decreased self-esteem, sexually transmitted infections, increased anxiety, avoiding specific situations, people, or places, withdrawing from classes and responsibilities, failing grades, increased alcohol or recreational substance use, guilt, and avoidance of physical contact. If you notice someone exhibiting any or a range of the aforementioned signs, consider talking with them. Reaffirm that you believe them, support them, and care for them. If your fraternity brother or sister is demonstrating signs that they have been hurt, you have a responsibility to check in with them. Effectively helping victims or being an advocate is one way to reduce stigma within a chapter. This can be done through actively listening to someone sharing their experience, offering reassurance and emotional support, and being aware of the resources at your disposal. Every member should be familiar with the answers to the following questions. What responsible campus employees are mandated reporters? What services are offered on campus to assist students affected by interpersonal violence? Who in the organization needs to be informed? And what support does your organization offer? The last component of effective education is creating a conversation within the chapter. If this is an ongoing and open dialogue, it will be less traumatic for someone needing to share their experience. Following education comes prevention. So you're informed. Now what? How do you apply what you've learned to practicality? First and foremost, don't rape. It's not a difficult concept. Real simple, just don't rape. Second is understanding consent. Consent is a mutual, voluntary, and informed agreement to participation in specific sexual acts. Consent is not achieved through manipulation, force, or coercion. Consent requires cognitive and emotional ability. Impairment or incapacitation detracts from and makes consent impossible to attain. Silence or an absence of resistance does not imply consent. There is no implicit consent. Previous sexual engagement with other partners is not consent. Previous consent is not consent. Consent is ongoing and may be withdrawn at any time. Communicate with your partners. If someone is too drunk, just don't have sex. If someone tells you to use protection, use protection. If someone wants you to stop, stop. With your reinforced understanding of consent, it's incredibly important to intervene when you feel that someone is being taken advantage of, or if someone is taking advantage of someone else. Additionally, end attitudes that support rape. Rape jokes aren't funny. You're just a dick. Much of the narrative surrounding sexual assault prevention is designed to be enforced by the victim. but the responsibility should be on the perpetrator and not raping. That does not mean you shouldn't be aware of your surrounding or cautious of your interactions, but the burden of responsibility should never be, here's what to do to not get raped. And God forbid, after all this education and prevention, there's a sexual assault, you need to respond appropriately. Listen, believe, support, and encourage. Reiteration that it is not their fault is crucial. No matter what the circumstances, it is always unacceptable to blame the victim. Don't ask what they were wearing. Don't ask how many drinks they had. Don't ask if they were being flirtatious. Literally, just sit there and listen non-judgmentally. Steps following sexual assault are crucial, but are ultimately based on the decision of the victim. Autonomy was stripped from them when their bodies were violated. Don't further victimize them by taking away their right to decide their next steps. Follow their lead, and without persuading them, offer medical, psychological, and advocacy services first. Then, if they want to report, provide the appropriate resources. Never pressure someone to report or pursue actions that they do not want. One response may be to request a sexual assault forensic exam or rape kit. If that is the case, the following information is important. Go to the hospital immediately. Avoid showering, using the restroom, changing clothes, combing hair, and cleaning up. If you need to change your clothes, store the evidence in a paper bag because plastic can retain moisture that will damage DNA, increasing the risk of contaminating evidence. Viable DNA must be collected within 72 hours in order to be analyzed by a crime lab. Most universities will provide a safe ride to the hospital if their campus facilities are not equipped to provide adequate care. The forensic exam is free. The Violence Against Women Act requires states to provide sexual assault forensic exams free of charge. Don't whip out your insurance card. If someone tries to charge you, call your local sexual assault service provider. Having the exam does not mean that you have to report. The decision to report is entirely one's own. However, if you are a minor, there may be mandated reporting based on your state's legislation. And if you do decide to report, the physical evidence increases the probability of prosecution. Even if the respondent is not persecuted, their DNA may be added to the national database, making it easier to connect them to potential future crimes. Prevention of future crimes should never be the sole reason in reporting. Reporting can be incredibly re-traumatizing. Victims should never be made to feel that it is their responsibility to stop their perpetrator from committing other sexual assaults. Overall, it is important to listen and offer suggestions without monopolizing the conversation. Allow the victim to share their experience in whatever capacity they require. Now is not the time to share your unsolicited opinions. Now is the time to offer support and assistance. Intertwined with all of the previous components is advocacy. The reason education, prevention, and response are so important is that you can be an advocate to those in need. If you're overwhelmed with the information I've provided you with in this video, imagine taking it all in after having experienced sexual violence. Or worse, being uninformed and going to your fraternity brother or sorority sister for help and being blamed, neglected, and ignored. Fraternity and Sorority Life has so much potential to be advocates for their members and to create a safe place for students on campus. Advocating for members ensures that the needs of each individual member are placed above that of the chapter. If you pledge to be a part of a brotherhood or sisterhood, actually be a brother or sister. Your chapter has the power to end rape culture and reduce sexual violence on your campus. Within your fraternity or sorority, you can advocate for those affected by interpersonal violence. Challenge yourself, challenge your brothers, challenge your sisters, take charge, lead an initiative, make a positive difference, and end rape culture within fraternity and sorority life. Thank you.
Encourage survivors to seek support and share resources like the National Sexual Assault Hotline and online chat. Know that you cannot force anyone into getting help. While there is no timetable for recovering from trauma, it is important to intervene if you believe someone is a risk to themselves or others.